Sure. Here's a rewritten version of your paragraph with improved flow, clarity, and emotional tone, while preserving the essence and cultural richness of the original story. Many years ago, in the lively neighborhood of Kaya Malasaka, lived a couple fondly known as the Happy Hour couple. Mosi and Moana believed that life was too short not to enjoy every moment. Even with children, their philosophy remained the same: take the kids along and keep living fully. From the day they got married, they were the life of every party, laughing the loudest at weddings, dancing the wildest at street carnivals, and never missing a Friday night at the neighborhood beer parlor. Everyone admired them. In a world where hardship had hardened many, Mosi and Moana always looked untouched, glowing with carefree energy. They didn't have much, but they had mastered the art of turning little into plenty. Moana worked as a roadside mechanic, while Mosi braided hair under the shade of a big mango tree near their home. Like everyone else, they had dreams, but their greatest dream was simple: to keep enjoying life, stay youthful, and keep dancing like teenagers. So, when Mosi became pregnant with their first child, they told everyone, "Nothing will change." And they meant it. After their daughter Tasha was born, they wrapped her in a colorful cheni cloth, strapped her to Mosi's back like a handbag, and resumed their usual Friday night outings. Even as a newborn, Tasha became part of the fun. She often dozed off peacefully amid loud music and chatter. "She sleeps better with music," Mosi would say with a laugh whenever someone raised concerns. As Tasha grew older, nothing changed. By the time she turned 4, she could sing along to the latest hip-hop hits and twist her tiny waist just like the women on TV. Whenever customers clapped and handed her sweets, she danced harder, much to her mother's delight. "My daughter is expressive," Mosi would say proudly. "She won't grow up shy and quiet like I was." When their second child, Chimuka, came along, he too was introduced early to their lively lifestyle. From the time he could crawl, he was navigating between crates of beer and empty bottles. By age 2, he had already learned how to lift his father's glass and mimic sipping. The crowd at the bar loved it. "This boy is truly his father's son," someone once shouted, and Moana laughed heartily, replying, "He'll be even greater than me." No one thought there was anything wrong. To them, it was all harmless fun and family bonding. "At least we're together," Mosi would say. "At least we're happy." And yes, they believed they were. While other families spent Saturdays cleaning the house, going to the park, or attending church, Mosi and Moana would dress up and head to their favorite spot in town, Number 9 Joint, a popular beer parlor. It had become a family tradition. Tasha would dance gracefully to the rhythms of local music, and Chimuka would raise his glass and gulp without a flinch. The first time he did it, the entire place erupted in laughter. "Look at how he holds that cup. A true son of his father." Moana boomed with pride. That same day, Tasha danced through an entire Chef 187 album, her small waist swirling in circles while adults clapped and cheered. "This girl is going to be a star," someone shouted. "Natural-born dancer." But instead of worry, Mosi beamed. "It runs in our blood. I used to dance like that before I got married." Moana nodded in agreement. "We'll start her on dance lessons," he said. But there were no lessons. What they meant was they would keep bringing her to the beer joint for practice. And so it continued. Week after week, month after month. The same scenes played out. Tasha danced on cue. Chimuka pretended to drink but would sneak into a corner and gulp down the real thing. The regulars thought it was all in good fun. "They'll outgrow it," they said. But the children weren't outgrowing it. They were absorbing it. Watching, learning, imitating. Tasha began to notice how the women at the joint dressed. She admired those in leggings and heavy makeup. One day, she asked her mother why she didn't paint her face like the others. Mosi just laughed. "Let me know if you want the next part, a continuation, or a voiceover script with image prompts." Here's the rewritten version of your second paragraph, refining the tone, enhancing clarity, and deepening the emotional narrative while keeping the original message intact. As Tasha grew older, the changes were gradual but clear. Most children began painting in coloring books, But Tasha started using red crayon as lipstick. Chimuka, on the other hand, became more restless. Whenever his parents tried to keep him at home, he would throw tantrums, crying, breaking things, shouting. One day, he stormed into the living room clutching his father's beer bottle and yelled, "Give me my drink!" He wasn't playing. And yet, Mosi and Moana didn't see a red flag. Instead, they laughed it off and said they were raising their children with freedom, that they weren't the type of strict parents who stressed over everything. "Life is too short to carry everything on the head," they often said. And because no one in their community spoke up, because society had begun to confuse recklessness with freedom and labeled irresponsibility as vibes or wokeness, they kept on. No one called them out. They weren't corrected, so they believed they were right. Eventually, Mosi grew tired of making trips to Number 9 Joint. She had a new dream, to run her own beer parlor where she could be in charge. The opportunity came when her childhood friend sent her 10,000 kwacha as part of a cooperative savings payout. Without hesitation, Mosi converted the front part of their compound into a makeshift beer spot. A few plastic chairs, crates of beer, and loudspeakers later, Misosai's spot was born. And by the third month it was booming. Music blasted from morning till night. The air was thick with smoke. Grown men crowded the place, washing down their frustration with beer while laughing over politics and women. But the biggest shift wasn't in their income. It was in what this new business did to their children. Tasha, now 10 years old, no longer played with dolls. After school, she served drinks at the joint like a seasoned waitress. She knew every brand of beer, each customer's favorite, and who owed what. 2 bottles of Castle and some roasted goat meat, someone would shout, and Tasha would dash off to fulfill the order without missing a beat. Her mother often smiled with pride. "She's learning the business early. Very sharp girl." But what Tasha was truly learning went beyond business. She was learning that men's attention often came with tips. That dancing for drunk uncles brought coins and compliments. That when someone called her sweet girl, she was supposed to feel proud. Sometimes, while her mother was busy in the kitchen, Tasha would sneak into the back to try on lipstick from her mom's purse or practice twerking while watching dance videos on Mosi's phone. Meanwhile, Chimuka's situation was spiraling. At just 8 years old, his eyes were constantly red. Not from sleepless nights but from weed. He had started hanging around with older boys who loitered behind the beer parlor, rolling papers and talking about things no child should understand. But nobody noticed when Chimuka began skipping school. Nobody questioned his dropping grades. Nobody said a word when he started bringing home stolen handbags, snatched from women on the road. In their household, as long as customers were laughing, the drinks were flowing, and the money kept coming, everything seemed fine. Mosi was proud of her progress. She now wore synthetic wigs with a neat center part. Blue lights decorated the entrance of her beer parlor. A signboard stood proudly outside. Misosai spot. Cold drinks, good vibes. Moana, ever supportive, bragged to his friends. "My wife runs this thing like a boss. No dull moment. We're opening another branch soon. Maybe Garden Parkside." But what he didn't see, what he refused to see, was the cost. One Friday evening, a man in his 30s tipped Tasha 5 kwacha after she served him. As she turned to leave, he reached out, pulled her closer and whispered, "Come sit with me. You're the sweetest one here tonight." Mosi was watching. She saw it all. But she didn't raise her voice or confront the man. Instead, she simply called out, "Tasha, come help me check the drinks in the big freezer." Tasha ran off, confused but excited. She liked the attention. That same weekend, trouble broke out. Chimuka got into a fight behind the beer parlor. 2 boys accused him of stealing their stash of weed. One of them smashed a bottle on the ground, ready to attack. But Chimuka, high and furious, grabbed a stool and swung. Within seconds, there was blood on the floor, screams in the air, and panic all around. The matter landed at the police station. But Moana, ever streetwise, settled it with a little something. Still, the family didn't pause. No one sat Chimuka down for a serious talk. No one questioned what was happening. They simply told him, "Next time be more careful." Because in their world, chaos had become normal. Madness was routine. And as long as the drinks kept selling and the music kept playing, they believed life was moving forward. Would you like me to continue with the next part of the story? Or would you like a full rewrite of the entire story from the beginning to this point, all in one? Baptized it as well. They continued this way. And when Tasha was 14 years old, something tragic happened. She suddenly stopped taking her bath before school and would wear sweater even when the sun was very hot. And then one afternoon when Miss Sosie scolded her for being sluggish, the little girl just stood there and stared blankly at the floor, trembling as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Her mother barked, "Tasha, are you deaf? What is wrong with you?" "Nothing, Mommy." She mumbled and walked away slowly. But that same night, when she believed everyone had slept, Tasha sat at the back of the house and cried. She wrapped her hands around her stomach and cried bitterly. She didn't understand how she got here. She just knew that her body felt strange and she hadn't seen her period in 2 months. And the worst part was she didn't even know who was responsible, because if she could remember well, there were 4 men. 4 different grown men had touched her in secret when her mother was busy frying meat and shouting over music. It started with one man tapping her backside as she passed with drinks. Another man asking her to come sit on Uncle's laps for 10 minutes. Then someone else gave her sweets, lifted her skirt and said, "Don't tell anybody or I won't give you sweets again." She was only 14 years old, but her innocence had been soaked in alcohol and stolen by shameless men. Then one morning while washing plates, she collapsed right there in the beer palace backyard. Miss Sosa screamed and neighbors rushed over to help. They poured water on her. And when she finally opened her eyes, an older woman bent over, opened Tasha's eyes, and turned to Miss Sosie. "Take her to a clinic. This child looks pregnant." Mosi laughed nervously. "Mama, please, not my daughter. Tasha is well trained. Just maybe malaria." But that evening the test came out positive. The nurse at the small government clinic stared at Miss Sosie like a judge. "Your daughter is 3 months pregnant." Miss S's heart fell like a bucket in an empty well. "Prague words." The nurse nodded. "You didn't know." Miss Sosie looked at Tasha, who sat there like a stone. She hadn't spoken since morning. She only hugged herself and shook like a fowl caught in the rain. When they got home, Tasha stood in front of her parents, who were still in shock. "Who did this to you?" her mother asked. Tasha looked down. "I don't know." "You don't what?" her father shouted. Tasha stammered. It could be Uncle BR or Uncle Joe or the one that always gives me bisque." "I don't know, Daddy." Miss Sosa screamed like a woman who just found a scorpion in her wrapper. She grabbed her wrapper and rolled on the floor. "God punish you. God punish you for this disgrace." Moana just stood there frozen. For the first time he did not know what to say. He remembered the times he had laughed with the same men Tasha just mentioned. Men he had shared roasted meat with, who clapped for his daughter when she danced to loud music in front of the bar. Now, one of them had turned her into a mother. By the next day, the news had already started flying around the compound. One nosying neighbor had seen them leaving the clinic and told another person, "It is pregnant." "Oh, I saw the test envelope." Unfortunately, the 4 men Tasha named denied being responsible. Bonda said, "Me? I have never touched that girl." "Oh, let her say it in front of the police if she's sure." Joe said, "It can never be me. That girl used to sit on everybody's lap. Maybe it is someone else." The biscuit man just shook his head and said, "I gave her sweets and biscuits because I have daughters too. How can people be this wicked?" Nobody confessed or owned up. And because Mosi didn't want police scandal, she swallowed her shame and cried in silence. Meanwhile, Moana fell back to more drinking. He drank as if he was trying to drown his shame in bottles. He sat in front of the same beer palo that breathed this destruction and swallowed bitterness like chilled beer, but he didn't taste sweet in his mouth anymore. He did not. Here's the rewritten and refined version of this final, powerful segment of your story. Crafted with emotional depth, clarity, and narrative flow, while staying true to your original voice and message. There was no more joy in the music, no more pride in the business, because Mosi's first baby, her beloved Tasha, was now carrying a baby herself. The worst part wasn't even the pregnancy. It was the quiet shame that followed. The same community that once clapped when Tasha danced now shook their heads in disgust, whispering judgment behind closed doors. That's how quickly adoration turns to condemnation when children are raised inside a beer parlor. Mosi and Moana were too shaken by the news to even notice how much Chimuka had changed. Their son had become a ghost in his own home, silent, sunken, lost. He spent his days with older boys known for stealing and breaking into homes. One of them, it was rumored, even carried a pistol. Chimuka was just 12, but he was smoking wee-wee behind the unfinished building by the football field, eyes red and spirit dimmed. One evening, Mosi noticed him sneaking out with a dirty bag. "Chimuka, where are you going with that bag again? And why are your eyes this red?" "I'm coming, Mama," he said, not even turning around. She wanted to stop him, wanted to raise her voice, but something stopped her. Guilt, perhaps. After all, this was the same child she once strapped to her back on her way to beer joints. The same little boy who proudly served beers to drunk uncles. What right did she now have to complain that he'd become a man too early? But Moana, he had reached his breaking point. Night after night, he sat and stared at Tasha's growing belly, and the guilt clawed at him like thorns around his neck. He had stopped drinking as much. The taste now reminded him of failure. Then one Tuesday morning, a loud knock shook the house. "Moanse, Miss Sosie, come out now." They rushed outside. A neighbor stood there, panting. "Chimuka's been arrested. They caught him and some other boys stealing phones. He had wee-wee in his pocket." Time froze. At the station, they found Chimuka behind the counter. His eye swollen shut, his lip bleeding. He looked like a street boy, one they had never met before. A short, stern-faced officer slammed his hand on the desk. "You people are mad," he barked. "You raise children in a beer parlor, then act shocked when they turn into criminals?" Moana stood frozen. Mosi dropped to her knees. "Please, officer. We didn't know it had gotten this bad." The officer scoffed. "You didn't know? After all those years watching him serve beer, dance to vulgar songs, play among drunkards, you didn't know?" He reached under the table and tossed a small black nylon onto it. "Here's what we found on him. One wrap of wee-wee, a penknife, and a stolen phone." Mosi wept like a broken drum. Moana's voice trembled like wind passing through dry leaves. "Please," he said, "give us one more chance. We'll take him away. We'll change." The officer stared at them for a long moment, then sighed. "I'll release him. But let this be the last time." That walk home felt like the longest in their lives. Chimuka didn't speak. His mother held him close like a soul returned from the grave. His father walked ahead, each step heavy with shame. When they got home, Moana went straight into the beer parlor. Without a word, he grabbed a hammer and began to smash every bottle in sight. The crashing glass echoed through the compound. He tore the banner off the wall. He unplugged the freezer and kicked it over. He screamed like a man possessed, a man haunted by everything he had allowed. "Enough. This bar has destroyed us." Neighbors came running. Some watched with pity, others sneered. "It's too late," someone muttered. "Serves them right." But Moana didn't care. With trembling hands and a broken heart, he dismantled what was left of their beer business. That night, he sat on the floor beside his wife, tears falling freely. "Miss Sosie," he whispered, "I failed us. We raised our children in a nightclub, then expected them to turn out holy. God forgive us." Mosi didn't speak. She simply held his hand and cried. Because deep inside she knew there were no excuses left. They had planted recklessness and were now harvesting ruin. The next morning, the compound was quiet in a way it had never been. No music, no laughter. Just the wind whispering over broken glass and empty crates. The beer parlor was no more. Let me know if you'd like the full story compiled into one document, turned into parts, or if you'd like image prompts and voiceover lines. Broken chairs leaned on the walls, and the signboard that once proudly read, "Miso's Corner," now hung sideways shamelessly. Inside their house, the family sat in silence. Chimuka was in the corner chewing on his fingernails. His body was present, but his mind was gone. It was wandering between the streets and the bad boys who had already introduced him to darker things. Tasha was in her room staring at the ceiling blankly. Her belly was 6 months heavy now, and nobody still knew who the father was. The police couldn't pin any of the 4 men she accused, as none of them agreed to it. And the DNA test could only be done after the child was born. Besides, one of the men had even traveled to South Africa. Miss Sosi sat on a small stool, looking at her family like a stranger. Her voice was lost as she had cried too much. And now all she could say was, "This is not the life I wanted. This is not the life I thought I would have." Moana stood at the window shaking his head non-stop. He knew wallowing in pity would not help them. And being the man of the house, he had to redeem them the same way he had led them to RU. So he stepped out and went to a small church around the corner, a place he once mocked. He sat in the back with his wrinkled shirt looking lost and out of place. 2 hours later, the pastor came in and saw him. "One, sir, what's a surprise to see you? But your eyes are shouting louder than your mouth. Talk to me. What is it?" Moana threw his remaining pride away and opened up. He told the pastor everything. How he and his wife turned their children into brides and be men. How their daughter got pregnant at 14, and how their son nearly went to prison at 12. And how he felt like he was cursed. The pastor shook his head in pity and said one sentence that Moana would never forget. "A broken home is not always a cursed home. Rather, it is a calling to rebuild." Moana went home and shared those words with Misoi. For the first time in their married lives, they held hands and prayed clumsy but honest prayers. Then they decided to make drastic changes. They sold the remains of the bar setup, used the money to register Tasha into a private maternity home away from the area. Miss Sosi started going for counseling sessions at a women's center, and Moana began taking Chimuka to a small youth rehab center in town. It wasn't easy, as the boy had already tasted a street life that made him feel powerful. But the consistent visits, deaf new boundaries at home, and the tears in his mother's eyes started to pull him back slowly. One night, while eating rice and beans, Chimuka looked up and said, "Papa, if I change, will you be proud of me?" He nodded, stood up, and hugged his son tightly like a man who had found his lost wallet after many years. As for Tasha, she gave birth to a baby girl. But when they handed the baby to her in the ward, she just stared at the child for a long time and sighed. Miss Sosi came, carried the child, and cried all over. "You are innocent. I promise to correct it with you. You will never grow up in a bar." From then on, their house remained quiet and simple. There were no more loud music, alcohol, or strange visitors. The broken signboard was taken down completely, and in its place started to plant vegetables. Years later, people forgot they ever ran a beer parlor. Tasha couldn't go back to school, so she learned how to bake and began a baking business from home. As for Chimuka, he began following his father to his mechanic workshop. And little by little, he was learning how to fix tires while learning how to live a responsible life. Miss Sosi, knowing she had failed as a mother, took the opportunity to start afresh by raising her granddaughter to be everything the 2 older generations were not. Because even though they nearly lost it all, God gave them a second chance. And they were going to make the most of it. Because it is never too late to choose a new path. Thank you for watching the story. Kindly share your thoughts about the story with me in the comment section. What lessons did you learn from the story? Kindly share the story out to as many parents as possible. Give this story a thumbs up and subscribe to this channel if you've not done so by now. Until I bring another story your way. Bye.